Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a huge pattern change that'll bring more severe weather to the United States over the next several days. I'll give you the latest breakdown and everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll begin with the Central Plains, which you may notice there is a ton of cloud cover today, and this is all due to a really weak surface low pressure system that is currently developing. This is actually what's going to bring the potential for some severe weather over the next few days, all the way through the weekend and potentially into next week. Back over near California, we have a much more defined low pressure system. This is an upper level low that is very strong right now, and it's going to continue to ramp up over the next few days as it moves inland, and this could also bring the threat for some severe weather to the United States. And there's a couple of gaps here in terms of the shower and storm activity. Back up in the northern plains, we do have a weaker ridge that is still in place from that omega block that we've been talking about in the past few forecasts. And also back down in the southeast, we have another high pressure system that is beginning to fill in, and this will keep areas relatively dry for the next several days. Now, we've been talking a lot about the omega block over the past several days with the ridge in the central United States and also the two low pressure systems on either side of the country. But things are going to start changing again, where we have a completely different pattern in the United States. So beginning with today, we still have a weak ridge back up into the northwest United States. We still have that upper level low back over to the west, and again, this is your jet stream here, so there is still a bit of an omega block, but we have that weak surface low that is developing in the southern plains today. And what this will do is bring more severe weather to areas like the southern plains and as well as the central plains and potentially the Midwest throughout the next 3 to 4 days. Once we go through Friday into Saturday, this omega block basically becomes non-existent. We'll eventually watch for a ridge back over on the eastern side of the United States to keep areas like the Ohio Valley and as well as the southeast dry. Meanwhile, here's your jet stream. We'll watch the threat for a negatively tilted upper level disturbance, potentially bring the threat for some severe weather over the weekend. Once we go into next week, we'll still be watching a really weak jet stream. It's not really that strong right now. Typically during May, we have a stronger jet stream, which allows for more severe weather, but a lot of the severe weather events that we have right now are going to be more based towards the lower levels in terms of maybe hail and damaging winds and maybe a couple of tornadoes as well. Once we go into late next week, things may start to ramp up again. Again, I still think sometime around May 10th to 15th is really our best chance for a significant severe weather event. I'm talking like an enhanced risk or worse across the United States. This is when we could very well see a very strong trough that could very well increase the threat for severe weather. And with that, you'll notice the jet stream would be much stronger in this sort of scenario. So I'll have to watch that once we go into mid-May. Again, I really think mid-May is when things really start to ramp up, even though the next few days will be quite active across the United States, and you'll see that in just a moment. Now, with the humidity, we're going to have these little weak troughs that are going to kind of set up in the central plains, so we'll naturally have a pretty strong southerly wind pulling moisture to the north, and what this will allow is the threat for severe weather to really exist across a large chunk of the United States, especially across the Great Plains and eventually even into the Midwest this weekend. This is going into Friday and Saturday. The dew points will rise into the 70s in some areas back through South Texas and even the upper 60s, and you'll notice right down here in North Texas, that is actually an area that I have some concern about the next 48 hours for some severe weather, because there will be a lot of buoyancy, there will be a lot of instability, so really a critical setup down over in North Texas where we could see some pretty large hailstorms both tonight and as well as tomorrow. Once we go into Sunday, I do have a bit more concern a bit further up to the north, so we'll have a low pressure system back over into the northern plains, and this might allow for some sporadic severe weather to kind of give off across the Midwest and as well as back through the central plains. This could turn into a severe weather outbreak if the low strengthens and if there's enough instability and if there's enough organization here with this sort of system, because all the ingredients are pretty much in place in terms of the low level jet. There will be some rotation in the lower levels, but it's just a question of if there will be enough humidity as well as the instability. Once we go into Monday into Tuesday, again, there will be a lot of humidity across the United States. The good news is right now there's no big organized systems, but the bad news is even though these systems are not organized, they still have the ingredients to produce some severe weather. As well as the instability, this is a big critical part of severe weather. Once we go into Friday, we'll have a lot of instability across North Texas, and even tonight, by the way, there is a chance for severe weather. There won't be a whole lot of instability, but we have so much moisture, and as well as the lower level winds will be strong enough to maybe produce some severe weather here across the southern plains. And once we go into Friday into Saturday, again, a lot of instability down in Texas. So if there's any sort of initiators, whether that's a cold front, a dry line, then we could see the potential for some significant severe weather, which definitely does exist down in the southern plains. plains. So what does this look like on the future radar over the next several days? We'll begin with today. That is when our first shot of severe weather will ramp up across the southern plains like Oklahoma and as well as through Kansas and Texas. Once we go into tomorrow, we'll still watch for the threat for some severe weather back down into areas like Texas, and eventually going into the weekend, we'll have that low pressure system developing back up in the central and northern plains. This could allow for some severe weather over in the Midwest and as well as maybe even into the central plains once we go into Sunday. And this could be very well our next chance for some significant severe weather in the United States. Going into next week, it's going to be a similar story all around. There's no organized areas of severe weather. It's going to be a lot of sporadic severe weather. You might notice back over in the Ohio Valley, there's going to be a chance for some showers and storms by around Monday or Tuesday. And then once we go through Wednesday and Thursday, again, we're just watching very disorganized systems in the United States. So a lot of these will produce severe weather. It's just going to be at a lower scale and nothing's organized. So the threat for, tornadoes being widespread or damaging winds being widespread would be super low in any sort of instance, at least for the next 7 days. Now, we do have some shots of severe weather over the next several days. Beginning with today, there is a slight risk of severe weather from Oklahoma back through Texas, and as well as a marginal threat that extends all the way from South Dakota into Texas, a very large area for this time of the year, but it is a low risk overall. This is going to be primarily for large hail and damaging winds. We also have a threat tomorrow, which this will be an interesting day to watch. We'll actually be watching for some large hailstorms to develop during the afternoon and evening across Texas primarily, and that's where I think the greatest concern is for severe weather tomorrow. There's a couple of outlying areas like Nebraska and as well as back through the lower Mississippi Valley, but overall the threat of severe weather will remain low in those areas. And then eventually going into Saturday, there is a couple of pairs of marginal risks of severe weather, but again, nothing too concerning. I think if we have any risk on Sunday, which the Storm Prediction Center has not issued a risk yet, but if there's to be one, it would likely be somewhere in this area from around Kansas City back through southern Minnesota. That would be my next concern across the United States on Sunday. Now, talking a bit more about today, there is again a slight risk of severe weather back through western Oklahoma and into Texas, and this will primarily be for the threat of large to very large hail, especially across central Texas and back through the hill country. That hatched region does represent a 10% probability within a 25-mile radius of some large to very large hail. For the timing today, we'll have some showers and storms initiate right around 3 to 4 o'clock this afternoon. You'll notice the best activity will be across areas like Wichita Falls, back through central Texas near Abilene, and as well as back through western Oklahoma. Main concern is large to very large hail. There might be some sporadic damaging winds, and I wouldn't rule out a brief tornado, but that threat will really be maximized across western Oklahoma. But the threat overall today will be fairly low, just really due to the fact the low-level jet is not very strong today. And for tomorrow, there is a risk of severe weather, primarily in Texas. That's going to include north and central Texas. This is for the main threat of large hail, but damaging winds and maybe an isolated brief tornado are not out of the question. There are two different scenarios here, one of which, or both of them, include the cap. So if the cap is overcome, this would actually end up occurring. We could see some strong to severe storms form sometime around the evening hours. These would primarily produce large hail. Now, the HRRR model does indicate that these storms are primarily in North Texas. But if we compare this to the NAM3K model, it does indicate that we'll have some showers and storms in two different areas, one of which is back through DFW. This would primarily be, again, large hail, and then also back down near Abilene, and this would be another area that we'd see some large hail and damaging winds, and this is the area that we might have an isolated brief tornado, but the threat remains really low at this time, and it does indicate it's a little bit earlier in the day, so keep that in mind. If the cap is overcome earlier, this sort of scenario would make more sense. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting and Alden's Repair.